Steven Guilbeault has resigned as Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. A lifelong environmental activist, Guilbeault says he can't support the government's deal with Alberta, a deal that would roll back some environmental regulations and chart a course for a potential pipeline to the BC coast.
This agreement today between Alberta and the Government of Canada, it's the first step. Several things have to happen before a pipeline is built. And one of those is a private sector proponent.
There's no mention of veto. I think that there obviously has to be trilateral discussions with British Columbia to find areas of common ground, and I think we will.
We need to make sure that this project doesn't become an energy vampire. We cannot afford as a country or as a province to lose real projects in the name of politics right now.
Okay, so a lot to dig into with our reporter roundtable. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Mia Rabson is the Deputy Parliamentary Bureau Chief at the Canadian Press. And Joël Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse, which means you're all too busy to actually be in my studio right now to do this, but I appreciate you being here. JD, let's start with you. I mean, Minister Guilbeault resigns. I mean, what does this mean for the government? What does it mean in Quebec?
Well, so Mr. Guilbeault acted as sort of a cautionary tale for Mr. Mark Carney for the environment cause. Now that he's gone, I think maybe many other Liberal MPs will be relieved of their duty to stay quiet, if I may say, and be more open about that criticism about the number of environmental setbacks that they feel the government has done, taking away some of the measures that the previous government did. But what is clearly happening, though, is that Mark Carney has decided to spend some political capital on this for Alberta to extinguish a possible national unity crisis because of what Madame Smith had said. If I don't get a pipeline, that will be clear proof that this federation doesn't work for Alberta. So I think he's extinguished this, but by doing that, he's started a fire elsewhere, and it's within his own caucus.
Yeah, Mia, you can see a lot of downside risk here on the political front for the Prime Minister, for the Liberals in the lower mainland of British Columbia, where the NDP got a gift today, in Quebec, in progressive circles, and still no guarantee of a pipeline, right? Just the process for it. So what do you make of everything that just happened today?
I mean, I think Mr. Carney went into this with his eyes wide open. He knew very well what Mr. Guilbeault's position was ahead of this, that a pipeline on the table was kind of a no-go zone for him, and they proceeded anyway. So their risk was losing him as a minister was sort of worth it for what they're doing with Alberta on this MOU. The fact that all of this risk is being taken for a pipeline, that even in sort of the best case scenario, even if it did, they could get agreement and all of that, we're still likely 10 years from this pipeline flowing any kind of oil. That's a big calculated political risk, but I think it's one that this Prime Minister has been signaling and gearing up for from the moment he was elected. I think I think this is why Danielle Smith has been so quiet for the last several months, because she knew what was on the table and she was negotiating a deal that, I mean, this is a big win for Danielle Smith. There is no doubt about it. She pretty much got everything she wanted from this deal today.
And on this panel, we've been very surprised at the reaction of Madame Smith on many occasions. Why? She's getting, very close. With Mr. Carney, we've got the reason why, because this was in the making for the last few weeks.
Yeah, and Bob, I mean, Mia's right that it could be a decade before this thing would be complete if it's approved. But I think in the technical briefing today, officials suggested the magical shovels in the ground could start in 2029. What do you make of this? A standing ovation in Calgary, a resignation from Quebec?
Well, look, Mr. Guilbeault, nobody can deny that. Has been a strong environmentalist. He's very principled. He resigned on principle. I'm not sure that other Liberal MPs, even though they're part of the Environmental Caucus, will be as brave as Mr. Guilbeault. You and I have watched the Liberal Caucus in action, and they speak anonymously when they speak to us. They're very brave when you ask them to put their name to it. They tend to, we can't do that. So I'm not sure that he's in that much trouble. In terms of this deal, look, I think the Prime Minister is sending a message to the international community, which for a decade have stayed clear of Canada because they just felt it's not a place for billions of dollars of investment dollars to come in, particularly on energy and other infrastructure projects. And he's sending the world, if you meet certain standards, we will not set up barriers for your investment. And even these negotiations that are going to come with British Columbia and the coastal First Nations, which I don't believe is probably ever going to lead to a pipeline, but or at least not immediately, but it's going to triple the size of TMX pipeline, which is going to bring billions and billions of dollars of money into the coffers of Alberta and the federal government. And we'll be getting our oil up to market. Plus, we've got these natural gas pipelines that are going, and significantly, if they can get that Pathways 400-kilometer pipeline that will carry carbon from the heavy oil sands to the carbon storage facility in Cold Lake. That, again, is billions and billions of dollars investment, and it can help bring down our greenhouse gas emissions.
Right, but the Pathways project is contingent on the new pipeline, and the new pipeline is contingent on the Pathways project. So you don't get the Pathways carbon capture and the 22 megaton reduction
but you might
in
get
emissions,
Pathways
right?
before you get the other pipeline.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, they're contingent on the case being made for a pipeline and the path to having one being open. I think Pathways existed before talk of this pipeline. It sort of pulled itself back because of some of these other things like the emissions cap. And to be honest, the Competition Bureau thing on greenwashing was also a big deal for the Pathways project. So there's nothing that suggests that the original Pathways project is only going to go ahead if a new pipeline is built, because many of these oil sands companies know they have to get their emissions down no matter what if they're going to remain competitive even with the existing product.
Right. So, Bob, just to go back to the Liberal caucus, and I would agree with you. I don't think there is a caucus revolt situation. I know there's caucus unease and unrest, but it's because they know how their constituents are going to react to this, right? The math on the lower mainland of British Columbia changes dramatically if this does not get solved politically, right?
You've identified the political problem. I don't think just in the lower...
No, but that's where they've got a lot of seats, right?
They've got a lot of seats, but it could have an effect in Quebec and Ontario too, particularly young people who care about the environment. So the challenge for the Prime Minister is how effective can he be at marshalling his caucus, because he's a new politician and he does not suffer fools gladly. We all know that. So let's see if he can be a Brian Mulroney and pull his caucus along with him. But we also have to remember that the country has woken up to the dangers of what is happening south of the border, and the fact that we have made very little progress in terms of major infrastructure and energy projects for the last decade. And if you had an election on that, that very well could lead the Liberals to win a majority government, because Brian Mulroney risked everything on a free trade agreement, and he won a majority government. So, you've got to have, people are smart, and if you give them a serious policy that you're going to make a difference in the economic well-being of the country, they may vote for you. Yeah. Particularly when you've got an opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, who's offering easy solutions, which is, I'll just approve this, I'll approve that. And we look how complicated it is, just what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, like there is no easy way to immediately approve a pipeline when you have legal duties to consult and multi-jurisdictions and stuff. But, JD, maybe Bob is right that if you do have an election on this, the downside risks in BC, maybe they're offset in other places. There were 1,200 people who paid to hear Mark Carney speak in Calgary. He got 2 standing ovations, including from people like Brett Wilson, which is wild, but
a Liberal Prime Minister.
Yeah, but there's only 34 seats in Alberta. I don't know if there's enough upside there to offset potential downside in other places. So there's a risk here.
Yeah, it's true, but I agree with Bob. I think if there was an election today, or tomorrow, I think Mr. Carney would be in a good position to probably win a majority. And going back to Brian Mulroney, he often said, if you want to be a transformative Prime Minister, you need to spend your political capital. And that's what Mr. Carney is doing right now. He's trying to transform, in my sense, the economy. And I think he's a pragmatist. He said he sees where the growth is.
Lyndon Johnson said the same thing. If you got political power, use it.
Use it.
Right. Well, he said at the end of his speech today, Mia, and I put this to Minister Hodgson earlier, he said, we used to take risks in this country. And he said that a few times, the Prime Minister has. I think we need to pay attention to that more, because he has shown there is an ambition and a fearlessness and a self-confidence to attempt these things, and he is willing to deal with the political turbulence it will create. They seem very unbothered by it.
They do. I mean, I think this is also a sign of the fact that we have an economist and a central banker as the prime minister and not a career politician. I mean, he's been around politicians his whole life, but he is approaching this job in a different way than most of his predecessors in recent memory have. He's taking calculated business risks and calculated political risks. I mean, to Bob's point, I think there are many people who might actually sort of shift to him. I mean, he was on the verge of getting a lot of those voters in April. Some voters, I mean, at some point the polls were suggesting they could win 6 to 8 seats in Alberta, and that was without him talking about a pipeline. That's right. He was on the verge of winning multiple other seats. So there's sort of room for them to grow in that sort of center-right part of the sphere. The biggest question is whether or not he can live up to the promises on the environmental side. And right now, his big promise when he got rid of the consumer carbon price was that he would strengthen the industrial carbon price. Right. He's not really doing that today. They're talking about it, but even to get it to the $130 for Alberta, at least, that they've been talking about, that's still $40 short of where the existing industrial carbon price was going to be by 2030. Clearly, it's not going to get there. It's a massive problem for them to, he said last week, and he promised Elizabeth May in the House of Commons.
Got her vote for it.
Got her vote, that they would meet their climate targets. And that's not, he talks about 2050. The climate targets under the Paris Agreement are for 2030.
But you know, he's a former UN envoy on the environment. He's got the creds. He's written books on it. You got to stack what he's doing up against his likely opponent, which is Pierre Poilievre. That's right. And he doesn't have a climate policy. He doesn't really care about the climate.
Yeah, so his policy is to have no climate policy, essentially. Everything that's been proposed goes.
When you go to the ballot box, you've got to make those kind of choices.
Absolutely.
Although there may be a room for the NDP for sure.
Well, this is where I want to go. And JD, because I want to ask this specifically about Quebec. You know, there's been a lot of talk about New Democrats lending their vote to Mark Carney in the last election to stop Donald Trump. The reality is most of the NDP seats that were lost went blue. They went to the Conservatives. The people who really lent him the vote were the Bloc Québécois voters in Quebec. And that is the most volatile dynamic where you can see that swinging back. Yeah. So maybe this appeals to economically minded voters in the center, but maybe some of the Democrats go back. What happens with that BQ vote, the blue vote that went to Mark Carney in the last election?
That's a very good question, and the Bloc is mindful that their vote went to Mark Carney in the last federal elections, and they would like to get it back. And so they're already trying to create a narrative that if Mark Carney can do that to BC, force the pipeline on BC without consulting, he can do it on Quebec too. So
that was the argument today. Blanchette saying we will stand up for BC.
Yeah, exactly. A separatist is standing up for BC. That's getting me in politics for you.
The Bloc.
I guess we've ended division.
The Blanchette standing up.
National unity.
Exactly.
Look, when you've got Mr. Blanchette standing up for something with British in its name, you know it is a seismic shift into a political dynamic, right? So Bob, the Prime Minister talks about the economic rupture. I guess he's right, and this is going to be the argument, though. Like when I interviewed Minister Hodgson earlier in the show, he said, everyone take a breath. He's going to go talk to people. Says he's going to meet with the coastal First Nations. They've got a selling job to do here to calm people down today.
They do, but they have a selling job on a whole number of fronts. But whether it's negotiations with the President of the United States, which have been sidelined, whether how quickly you can diversify trade to other parts of the country. But you can see an election strategy coming here. I mean, he's going to China, he's going to India, he's going to have free trade with India, he's got billions of dollars of investment from the United Arab Emirates. You can see all this sort of thing coming into place. And if in the spring happens, because we're in, all the parties seem to be wanting to push the government right to the edge, they could see them pulling the plug in the spring.
But, do you see Emirati money, $70 billion going into a pipeline? I mean, the sequencing of this.
It makes no sense for them to put it into necessarily into a pipeline, because they've got all the oil in the world.
Sure. But if they're looking to diversify and get into infrastructure that gives you rents
and stuff like that, right? Ports and critical minerals, which they want, that's where you can see a lot of money. And we haven't even touched, really, what's going on in terms of the critical mining initiatives that are underway. These are very, very significant mines, which are going to require a lot of money, UAE money.
Right. And JD, I was talking to a European diplomat this week just about the pace and scale of the government, how frantically it's moving on things like stuff like that would normally take a year, 2 years, 3 years to scale up, at least is there in some form in a question of months. The issue with that is growing pains, right? You hit a growing spurt, your legs ache because it's going so fast, and that's tough in a shared jurisdiction country like Canada.
That's a good metaphor, though. I think it's probably what we see with this government. It's growing pain. It's governing, yes, making decisions, but along the way, they're losing a cabinet minister because they're trying to grow the economy in a way that, that cabinet minister, who, by the way, approved Baie de Nord in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's, shouldn't be forgetting about that. But I think I just want to say something that I thought before coming on this show. I went to Alberta in 2019. That was a tour that I did on my RV, trying to go and reach before the federal election and meet people across the country. And I went all the way to Vancouver Island. But along the way, I stopped in Alberta. And here's what I discovered. Oil is to Alberta part of its identity. It is the same thing as French for Quebec. It is part of its DNA. And so to understand this, I think Mr. Carney understands that. It is part of the Alberta identity. Energy, oil, and all that. You see that everywhere when you go. And I think the federal government is only recognizing that today.
Well, let's also remember the fact that Alberta is helping all of the country.
Exactly.
Billions and billions of dollars of revenue from
especially
Alberta
Quebec.
oil and natural gas is going to in transfer payments back to Ontario and Quebec and other provinces.
But JD's right on the cultural importance of the industry. It's like the fishery in Atlantic Canada. I remember saying to a Liberal political staffers, when you pick your fisheries minister, think about the way you pick your culture minister in Quebec. It's a similar sort of thing on the wharf, right? You got to be able to go there and speak to them and understand it. But I wonder, Mia, if this becomes a real challenge, though, for the people who are there and the holdovers, right? Like talking to people from British Columbia this week, MPs, they are, apparently, at one point in the BC caucus meeting the other day, Hetty Fry looked at Tim Hodge and said, you need to understand politics, right? Because they understand economics, but this is seats on the line right now.
Absolutely. And again, I said it before, this is a prime minister for whom politics, he is learning on the job as he goes with this, and as are many of his cabinet ministers. There are a lot of people who are in that caucus from the previous administration and with Justin Trudeau. There's also a lot of people in that caucus who joined because of Mark Carney. So they also, many of those Liberals, even if they were there before, much like they knew they owed their seats from 2015 to Justin Trudeau, they know they're only in government today because of Mark Carney. And so there is going to be some loyalty within that party and from Liberals. We've seen it for a long time. There will be concerns. There's definitely going to be some nerves in seats in British Columbia, likely in some places in Quebec. But a lot of them are giving him a very long leash, and to see how far he can go and what he's actually going to do. Today, I think it upset a lot of Liberals. I think they're confused about what was going on because they didn't necessarily have a great understanding. They weren't brought along the way. A lot of this kind of got dumped on them in the last few days. They didn't really know where this was going, and they're still digesting it. But I don't think that you're going to see a massive uprising amongst the Liberals, but you are going to see a lot of nervous people.
We'll see soon enough, I think, how the population receives this proposal. I think we'll have by-elections probably in early 2026 when some former cabinet ministers are appointed to ambassadorship.
Christopher Freeland has 3 jobs now. We know Bill Blair's going to go to the UK as the High Commissioner.
And Jonathan Wilkinson, the BC.
To Brussels maybe or something?
Yeah, maybe.
Like that.
So those appointments will open up some seats, and this, I think, will know the mood of the nation. But I would say that if the trade war with the United States continues, if USMCA is put at risk in 2026, I think Mr. Carney will have much more leeway than we could imagine today.
Well, this is the thing, right? So Bob, the Prime Minister is going to go to Washington next week, and it looks like President Sheinbaum of Mexico may also be there. So this bilateral could turn into a trilateral because of soccer. Football for the purists at home. But if things don't get moving there, it does make the argument for a pipeline far more compelling, right? Because you can't control Donald, but you can control this.
Well, yeah, there's nobody knows what's going to happen with Trump. They could, you're right. Next week, they could kiss and make up and say, okay, let's sign a deal. And they'll next thing you know, the Prime Minister staying over for another day, which is entirely possible. One hopes that they can move along with that. But we saw this week the government is saying, okay, maybe this is not going to happen. Maybe we have to wait for the negotiations. So we're going to put in these measures right now to help the steel industry and help the lumber industry, which, by the way, was pretty well received from those two industries. And maybe in some ways we're saying to the Americans, okay, you cut off negotiations with us, we're going to move on.
I think one of the most important things that I heard from Mr. Carney yesterday was let's focus on what we can control.
Yep.
We can't control the United States. We can control certain things on this side of the border, so we're going to focus on what we can control. And I think that is the message that he was sending very strongly, including with this decision.
30 seconds.
Yeah, there is a premier I'm anxious to hear it from. It's Doug Ford about this pipeline project.
He said me too on the carve-outs. They want
There
it
you
too.
go.
Like national environment policy, forget it, right?
So Canadian.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, everybody has a Me Too clause in their personal collective agreement with the government of Canada. Look, what a day. We're going to have a cabinet shuffle, obviously. We don't have a Minister of Culture and Canadian Identity. We have an acting Minister of Transportation,
Stephen McKinnon do that one too?
Yeah, exactly.
And Joël Lightbound mentioned as a possible Quebec lieutenant in Quebec, just for you.
Okay, there you go. JD always brings a bit of news on these things, so there you go.
That makes sense.
All right, well, thank you all very much. What will we talk about next week? Reporter Roundtable, Robert Fife, Mia Rabson, and Joël Denis Bellavance.